Hi, good afternoon and welcome. You are tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the 145 Museum of Civil Rights. We'll be getting started in just about 5 minutes, so we'll be kicking off at about 2:10. We thank you for your patience and looking forward to hearing your testimony. Thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. You're tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the 145 Museum of Civil Rights proposal. The seeker number for this application is 21DCP167M. My name is Stephanie Shalou, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division at the Department of City Planning's Environmental Assessment and Review Division. Olga Abnader, Director of EARD, will co-host today's meeting, and in the event of any technical challenges on my end, Olga will take over the meeting on my behalf. We truly appreciate your patience as we adjust to this remote meeting format and its challenges. I want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day to attend this virtual meeting. I want to acknowledge that technology such as this isn't perfect. However, it's an invaluable tool that allows us to continue the critical land use and environmental review processes to proceed while keeping us all safe during this public health crisis. I also want to emphasize that we will hear from everyone who wishes to speak today, and this meeting will remain open until we have heard from all speakers. We also welcome written comments and testimony through Thursday, May 20th, 2021, and we provide written comments the same attention and consideration as those provided live at this meeting. Next slide, please. We will now proceed to the public scoping meeting for the 145 Museum of Civil Rights proposal. For the record, let me note that the City Environmental Quality Review or seeker application number for the project is 21DCP167M. Today's date is May 10th, 2021, and the time is next slide. Again, my name is Stephanie Shalou, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Environmental Assessment and Review Division at the New York City Department of City Planning. I'll be chairing today's scoping meeting. The Department of City Planning is acting on behalf of the City Planning Commission as the lead agency for the project's environmental review. As lead agency, the department is responsible for overseeing the preparation and completion of the proposal's environmental impact statement, or EIS. Next slide, please. Joining me today are several of my colleagues from the Department of City Planning. As I mentioned, Olga Abnader, Director of Environmental Assessment and Review Division, is joining us today. Annie White is a team leader for the department's Manhattan office. Diane McCarthy is a senior team leader in environmental assessment and review. Evren Olgar-Kajar is the project manager for the project in environmental review, and Jose Trucios is the project manager for the project's land use application. I will also mention that during today's remote meeting, we're joined by several members of DCP who have worked hard to assist us in the background. Many thanks to them. Next slide, please. Together, we're here to receive your comments on the draft scope of work for the Draft Environmental Impact Statement, or DEIS, for the 145 Museum of Civil Rights proposal. The draft scope of work identifies the subjects that will be analyzed in the upcoming DEIS and describes the methodologies that will be used in those analyses. The draft scope of work materials are posted online on the Department of City Planning's website. Next slide, please. The purpose of today's public scoping meeting is to allow for public participation in the preparation of the DEIS at the earliest possible stage in the environmental review process. Specifically, scoping allows the public to help shape the DEIS before it is written. Towards that end, the department, as lead agency, will receive verbal testimony on the draft scope of work from elected officials, government agencies, those representing the local community board, and the public. As I mentioned, we also welcome written comments on the draft scope of work, and written comments can be submitted through Thursday, May 20th, 2021. Next slide, please. At the end of the written comment period, the department as lead agency will review all comments received, those we hear today, as well as those written comments that we have received. After carefully reviewing all comments, the department will decide what changes, if any, need to be made to the draft scope of work and will issue a final scope of work. It is the final scope of work that serves as the basis for preparing the draft environmental impact statement. Next slide, please. Today marks the beginning of the written comment period for the draft scope of work. No decisions will be made today regarding the draft scope. The purpose, again, is to allow the public to provide their comments on the draft scope of work and allow the department to listen to those comments. It's important for all voices to be heard today. Next slide, please. I'll now focus on the structure of today's meeting, which will be divided into 3 parts. First, the applicant team will make a brief presentation describing the 145 proposal. Then a representative from AKRF, the environmental consulting firm for the application, will provide a brief summary of the environmental review's draft scope of work. This should take about 20 minutes. Then during the second part of the meeting, the department will hear testimony from elected officials, government agencies, and those speaking on behalf of the local community board. Then during the third and final part of the meeting, we'll be receiving testimony from members of the general public. Next slide. On to a few logistics for today's meeting. The protocol, again, is intended to ensure that everyone has a chance to speak. If you wish to speak and plan to access this meeting online using a computer, tablet, or smartphone, please remember to register online through the 145 Museum of Civil Rights public scoping meeting page of the NYC Engage portal at www.nyc.gov/NYC-engage. A link to join us to provide your testimony will be emailed to you after you have completed the registration process on the NYC Engage portal. Then we'll add you to our speakers list. Next slide, please. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called and you'll be promoted to panelist in Zoom. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and the ability to turn on your camera. There will be a short period where it appears that you are no longer in the meeting. Do not be alarmed, as you'll join the meeting shortly as a panelist. Please note that this does take a second, so please be patient. Once your name has been called, you will be asked to unmute your microphone and asked to convey your remarks. To allow us to hear from everyone, we ask that you limit your remarks to 3 minutes. If you are participating online, you'll see a 3-minute timer run on the screen. At the 3-minute mark, your time will expire and you will be asked to conclude your remarks. If you do choose to turn on your camera, we will be able to see you. Next slide, please. An additional note of instruction for those of you joining us by phone. If you wish to provide testimony via telephone, you'll be asked to select *9 when prompted. Please listen for me to call out the last 3 digits of your phone number. At that point, you will be given the temporary ability to share your testimony. You must press *6 to unmute your telephone, and we'll be able to hear you speak here at this meeting. When your testimony is complete or your 3 minutes have expired, whichever comes first, you will press *6 again to mute yourself. We would like to encourage dial-in participants who wish to provide testimony to register via phone using the dial-in participant hotline. Please note again that muting and unmuting registered speakers does take a moment, so we ask for your patience. Next slide. Onto time limits. Speakers from the general public have 3 minutes to give their testimony. There are a few exceptions to this 3-minute time limit. Elected officials, for example, are given the courtesy of jumping to the front of the queue and are not limited to 3 minutes. To those of you viewing us on the live stream and wishing to testify, please be mindful of potential background noise during your testimony. Make sure that the live stream is muted when you begin your testimony to avoid hearing an echo. Next slide, please. If you do wish to submit written testimony, it can be submitted to us at the following mailing address: Department of City Planning, attention Olga Abinator, 120 Broadway, 31st floor, New York, New York, 10271. You can also email your comments to the email address shown here, 21dcp167m_dl@planning.nyc.gov. We will accept comments on this project through Thursday, May 20th, 2021. Next slide. If you missed any of the instructions, please do visit the NYC Engage page for instructions on how to participate and provide testimony. We'll now move to the first part of the meeting. The applicant will present an overview of the proposed project, followed by a summary of the draft scope of work. I'll now hand it over to Tristan Nadal to begin the presentation.
Thanks, Stephanie, and thanks everybody for joining us for this meeting. My name is Tristan Adal on behalf of the sponsor and applicant. I'm pleased to present the 145 and Museum of Civil Rights project, development that aims to reinvigorate the 145th Street corridor in Harlem. I'll take the next few minutes to give an overview of the project and its benefits, then I'll hand it off to Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin to discuss the land use action necessary to realize the project. Valerie will be followed by Lynn Doe from AKRF, will detail the framework of the proposed project, SECRA analysis, and then DCP will take comments. Next slide. The project team includes 145 Lennox LLC, the applicant entity, Shop Architects as the architect, AKRF as the environmental planner, Kramer Levin Neftalis as land use counsel, the Civil Rights Foundation, who's obtaining a provisional charter to operate the proposed Museum of Civil Rights, and the Department of City Planning as the lead agency. Next slide. So the proposed project is located in Harlem. It fronts on the wide cross street of West 145th Street between Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard and Lenox Avenue. And it continues east along Lenox Avenue down to the corner of 144th Street. It's across the street from the Colonel Young Playground. It has excellent access to public transportation. It's immediately adjacent to the 145th Street number 3 train station and sits along bus service on both Lenox Avenue and across 145th Street. Next slide. So here's a view of the existing land use map. The uses at the development site include transportation and utility, vacant land and buildings, and commercial and office use. Surrounding the development site, there's a substantial amount of residential use with ground floor commercial retail. Next slide. Currently, the development site contains a handful of one-story retail, community facility buildings, vacant lot, vacant gas station, and an operating gas station. The existing structures are mostly dilapidated and have quite a few vacancies. There's no residential on site and none will be displaced in the development of the proposed project. Many of the commercial tenants are on month-to-month leases or leases expiring this summer by July 2021. We're working actively with those commercial tenants that wish to relocate within the neighborhood, including those that may remain in the project, like the National Action Network. Next slide. Currently, the proposed 145 Museum of Civil Rights is a 2-building project containing a museum, residential units, ground floor retail, office space, parking, and an event space, and will provide affordable housing in accordance with mandatory inclusionary housing regulations. Building 1 will be located along Lenox Avenue and the eastern portion of 145th Street. Building 2 will be sited west of the museum on 145th Street in the middle of the block. Parking will sit in the basement underneath both buildings. We're proposing 2 development scenarios. The first scenario will contain a commercial office in the entire podium of Building 1, while the second fills most of the podium with residential units. The sponsors of the site are pursuing approval of 2 scenarios to allow for some flexibility to gauge the market demand for the space as the economy recovers and emerges from the disruption caused by COVID-19 pandemic. Both scenarios will provide a large number of market rate and affordable housing apartments across both buildings, as well as the 50,000 square foot Museum of Civil Rights, a rooftop event and gathering space, a new headquarters and Hall of Justice community gathering space for Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network, which will all be located in Building 1. Any commercial office space would also be provided in Building 1, and there'll be ground floor retail and below grade parking in both buildings. Both buildings will contain approximately 29 stories. Next slide. So, as mentioned, the primary difference between the 2 scenarios is the amount of residential units compared with the amount of commercial office space offered in the podium of Building 1, as you can see here. The residential podium scenario would include approximately 73 additional residential units and about 57,000 additional residential square feet. In contrast, the commercial podium scenario would include an additional 57,000 square feet of commercial space and about 73 fewer residential units. Next slide. And we believe the project will confer many benefits on the neighborhood, highlighted by the creation of the 50,000 square foot Museum of Civil Rights, which is designed by the renowned designers Shop Architects and Ralph Applebaum Associates, and operated pursuant to a provisional charter obtained by the Civil Rights Foundation, which is co-chaired by Reverend Al Sharpton and the Honorable Jonathan Lippman. The museum seeks to broaden and deepen our collective memory of the nation's iconic civil rights struggle in New York and beyond, while actively nurturing future generations of visionary leaders and catalysts for change. We anticipate the music will afford many educational and training opportunities for local residents and folks nationwide on subjects of activism, social justice, conflict resolution, the arts, and more. The team's actively working on local partnerships to ensure these opportunities are realized within the community. The project will create thousands of permanent and temporary jobs and will make a commitment to local and minority hiring practices. The proposed project will house a new and expanded headquarters and community gathering center for the National Action Network, who's currently on the site, and a local civic hub for activism and locally and nationally. And it'll replace its current office on site. Depending on whether the residential or commercial scenario previously mentioned is built, the proposed project would create up to 285 affordable rental housing units, which would be affordable to families of four making $90,000 and less. And finally, the project would create much needed office and event space, which is currently lacking in the neighborhood, all in a cohesive, environmentally sustainable, and transit-oriented development. I'll now let Valerie Campbell from Kramer Levin take you through the land use actions required for the project.
There we go. Good afternoon. I'm Valerie Campbell. I'm a partner at Kramer Levin, and we're land use counsel to the applicant. And I want to briefly describe the land use actions we will be requesting. First, we're asking for rezoning. Currently, the development site is zoned R72 and C83 with a commercial overlay. These zoning designations have remained unchanged since the 1961 enactment of the zoning resolution. The R72 is a medium density residential district that permits up to 6.5 FAR, which does not require the provision of affordable housing. It is confined to the southern half of the block fronting on Lenox Avenue. The rest of the development site is mapped in a C83 commercial district, which has a 2 FAR associated with it. This district does not permit residential use or museum use, and allowable uses in the C83 include gas stations, automobile showrooms, storage facilities, as well as general office and commercial. The proposed C46 zoning district is a higher density residential district that allows up to 12 FAR with the provision of affordable housing. It will permit the proposed residential use, the museum, the proposed office use, as well as neighborhood retail. The project team believes that the proposed zoning is consistent with recent rezonings in Harlem that have increased residential density and encouraged vibrant street character along major thoroughfares and transit hubs. The project will also require a zoning text amendment to designate the development site as a site required to provide affordable housing under the city's mandatory inclusionary housing program. This means that the new project will provide approximately 250 to 282 units of permanently affordable housing. Next slide. This slide shows the existing and the proposed zoning, and the left is the existing zoning and the right is the proposed. And you can see that the rezoning area in this instance is confined, is coterminous with the boundaries of the development site. Next slide. This slide shows the massing that is being proposed for the proposed building under the rezoning. This is showing a total FAR of 12, which is approximately 826,000 square feet of zoning floor area. It consists of, the building is configured as 2 towers on a base. And if you look at this diagram, the pink area that links the 2 towers is the Museum of Civil Rights. Next slide. The project requires 2 special permits, one pursuant to section 7474, which is the general large scale, to modify the height and setback regulations and the supplementary use regulations. And these modifications both actually relate to the placement of the special event space at the top of building 1. We are also requesting a special permit pursuant to 74-533 to modify the residential parking regulations. Next slide. So this diagram sort of shows the special permits that we are requesting. The first is the location of the event space. Our event space, which is a use group 9, is located above the residential units. And it is also in part of the tower that penetrates the sky exposure plane. So we need a special permit to allow the placement as shown here. We also need the special permit to locate the event space entry on the ground floor within 50 feet of the street wall. The second special permit is required to reduce the required parking from 40% of the market rate units to 20% of the units. This special permit, we believe, will still provide the expected amount of parking that we need, but avoids having to excavate a second level of subgrade parking or to place parking on the ground floor. Next slide. We are also requesting 2 certifications. Next slide. The first certification is a certification to waive the requirement that 50% of the street wall at the ground floor be used for commercial uses. We are not able to provide this amount of retail in building 1 because the museum will be taking up a substantial amount of ground floor frontage. The second is we're asking for additional curb cuts on a wide street, 145th, to provide access to the required loading and parking space. Next slide, Lynn Doe will be taking over now to present the analysis framework and the key technical areas that will be considered in the EIS. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Good afternoon. As Tristan has noted, in order to allow for flexibility in the development of uses on the site, next slide, please. The draft EIS will analyze 2 reasonable worst-case development scenarios, a residential podium and a commercial podium program. For the environmental review, the analysis year will be 2026. That's when the proposed project can be reasonably expected to be constructed and be operational. The DEIS will assess future conditions in 2026, which will include a general background growth, as well as other specific projects in the project area. Next slide, please. As you can see here, the difference between the 2, the residential scenario and the office scenario, is approximately 53,350 gross square feet that is being shifted from the residential program to a commercial. This represents a difference of about 70 dwelling units. In total, the program for both development scenarios is approximately 866,700 gross square feet. Next slide. The 2 reasonable worst-case development scenarios will be compared against a no-action scenario. which is a program that could be developed on the site absent the approval of these requested discretionary actions that Valerie had just gone over. That no action scenario includes approximately 41,500 square feet of residential, which represents about 49 dwelling units, approximately 180,000 commercial office, 33,000 a community facility, and 70,000 of retail. A total of 325,000 square feet of baseline development could be expected under the no action scenario. Next slide, please. The incremental, as such, the DEIS will be assessing the potential for significant adverse impacts of approximately 540,000 gross square feet of development, as you can see here from the two tables. Again, the differential is really the swap between the residential and commercial office. Next slide, please. What you'll see here is the DEIS will follow the City Environmental Quality Review, better known as SECRA, technical manual. It is the guidance that is used on all city projects by all agencies, and we will be using that for impact as well as screening thresholds. It will provide impact studies for all 18 areas shown on the slide. The analysis will account for predicted changes in background conditions and then consider how the project would affect those future conditions. The one exception is construction, which considers impacts that could occur during construction prior to the completion of the project. The DEIS will also consider alternatives to the proposed project. So we'll consider a range of reasonable development options or alternatives and whether those alternatives could avoid or reduce project-related significant adverse impacts while still achieving the stated goals and objectives. It will also include a description of the proposed mitigation measures, which are feasible and practicable measures that could be advanced to avoid or minimize significant adverse impacts that are identified in the draft EIS. Next slide, please. I just want to briefly highlight some of the technical areas that we will be looking at specific to this particular project. Land use, zoning, and public policy considers the effects of the proposed actions in terms of land use compatibility on the surrounding neighborhood, as well as trends in zoning and public policy. Our DEIS will analyze a quarter-mile study area. And because the site is located in the coastal zone, we will also include waterfront revitalization program and the coastal assessment for consistency. Next slide, next please. Open space will consider a half-mile study area for residents and account for any public open space improvements. Shadows will assess the potential effects of nearby public open space, including the Colonel Charles Young Playground, as well as the Harlem River and other historic features as appropriate. The urban design analysis will assess the effects of the new buildings on pedestrian level experience with views from the surrounding area and more distant views from other publicly accessible areas. Next slide, please. The hazardous materials will summarize the environmental reports and work performed to date, the status of its application in the New York State Brownfield Cleanup Program, and identify any additional work required to avoid adverse impacts. We will look at transportation and will develop travel demand characteristics in coordination with the Department of City Planning and the New York City Department of Transportation. Our analysis will consider traffic, transit, and parking effects on the area street network, as well as account for vehicular and pedestrian safety. On air quality, the assessment will look at detailed stationary source analysis from our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, as well as look at for the potential effects of the proposed parking facility. The noise analysis will identify potential noise attenuating measures needed for the project buildings to achieve compliance with the noise standards. And greenhouse gases. We will be quantifying GHG emissions and assess the consistency with the city's established reduction goals. We will discuss potential measures to reduce energy consumption and GHG emissions and evaluate the potential effects on climate change on the proposed project and discuss project design elements that could address future conditions. And lastly, construction impacts. And we will look at construction impacts as they relate to the effects on transportation, air quality, noise and vibrations, and what those effects are within to the surrounding study area. And we will identify mitigation, we will identify measures that will help avoid or minimize those effects. And back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Lynn and team, for the presentation. We will now move on to part 2 of the meeting. At this time, we'll receive testimony from elected officials, community board leaders, and government agencies. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called and you'll be promoted to panelist. This will allow you to unmute your microphone and the ability to turn on your camera if you wish. There will be a short period, again, as I mentioned, where it will appear that you're no longer in the meeting. Do not be alarmed, and you will automatically rejoin the meeting as a panelist. If anyone is experiencing technical issues that prevent you from sharing your testimony today, we'll pause and move on to the next speaker to allow for troubleshooting to happen in the background. And we'll call your name again when we resolve. If this does happen, we encourage you to visit our how-to guides on the NYC Engage website for assistance. Also for assistance, callers who are on the phone can hang up and dial 877-853-5247. And when prompted for a meeting ID, dial 952-5914-5598. When prompted for a password, dial 1. Okay, it does not appear that we have any speakers signed up for part 2. So we will now proceed to part 3 of the public scoping meeting, where members of the general public will be permitted to speak for up to 3 minutes. We will display the time tracker if you're watching via Zoom. So it looks like we're set there. Again, please remember to conclude your remarks after 3 minutes have passed, and we will ask you to conclude. And again, if anyone is experiencing technical difficulties, we encourage you to check out the how-to guides on NYC Engage, call the dial-in participant hotline, or submit your testimony via email. Okay, we'll now move on to our first couple speakers. The first 2 are Dolina Duzant, followed by Dana White. Dolina Duzant will take a moment to promote you to a panelist, and you should be able to.
Yes. My question is, I like the plan. It's very aggressive, and I previewed it before. However, when you say up to $90,000, that's not the median income here in this area. And also, I'm part of the Malcolm X beautification group where we beautify the avenue. How can we partner with you to get assistance? Like you stated that you would be willing to partner with community organizations for assistance, and mainly the affordable housing issue, because people in our community make less than $40,000 a year. Anybody going to answer?
Thank you for your testimony. The format of the meeting, we won't be responding to the feedback today, but again, we're here to listen and compile all of the concerns, and all comments will be responded to in the final scope of work, which will be published following our response to the comments.
Also, who are the developers? Oh, the developers, and how can we partner with you beforehand so you'll get to know us, we can get to know you, and just have a nice meet and greet.
Yeah, we as the applicant group, we can arrange to to meet with local community-based organizations like yourself.
Will you send me your email so I can say hello?
I believe we have everyone, if you registered via Zoom, we have your contact information and can pass that along to the applicant team.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Yay!
Okay,
I'm
thank you.
really excited. I'm excited. I'm really, truly excited.
Great, thank you so much for your testimony. Okay, our next speaker is Dana White. Dana White, you should be promoted to panelist in just a moment and have the ability to share your testimony.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm just concerned. One, I think that there's been a lack of public outreach, just this meeting in general. There's been little community engagement around the project. It seems the only engagement that has really taken place primarily is with Mr. Sharpton, his offices, and whatever the project is that encompasses the museum. There's been a lot of talk on this call just about the museum, the civil rights, which, you know, as an African-American woman, I certainly appreciate that. But what is of utmost concern is, one, that it drives up the median income with the non-low income housing, and two, the size of the towers that it, as a resident of Esplanade Gardens, that it will circumvent some of the views that have been a long part of our development. I have concerns around that. The Plan B that has a shorter structure with less housing sounds a little bit more desirable, but also the transit system, that 145th Street train station has a very short platform, which only allows for 3 subway cars. And there's a just a concern about safety there with new population of residents and the overcrowding of that subway station. That is a concern. But I really would appreciate a little bit more transparency with notification of when these hearings occur. You can see it's a very low turnout for this particular phone call. So I think that outreach to the community that this is immediately affecting is very important. So that concludes my statement. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony and for joining today. I'll now call the next several speakers. Speaker 3, Katrina Jefferson, followed by Folivi Dosa, Christina Dudley, and Sean Hill. So Katrina Jefferson, you are the next speaker. Okay. I believe the House of Justice location should have the panelist privileges now to unmute the microphone so that Katrina Jefferson is able to provide their testimony. We'll give them just a moment. Hello, welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katrina Jefferson. I am the House of Justice Coordinator for the National Action Network, which basically means I oversee the House of Justice, which is National Action Network's headquarters here in Harlem. I think it's very important to note for everyone that's watching, whether it's live or you happen to be watching the playback, that National Action Network and the Civil Rights Museum are both tenants of 145 Linux LLC. We are not in partnership with the developers. We are not on the board of the development team. We have no more influence over what happens within this space as we do with what happens in the middle of Times Square. And so that I think that's very important to identify that and to create that distinction that National Action Network is a tenant. We've been a tenant of this space for the last 15 years and moved here during the height of the Sean Bell trial. And of course, as the nation mourned the loss of James Brown. Founded in 1991 by Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton, NAN works within the spirit of and the tradition of Martin Luther King to promote a modern civil rights agenda. Having occupied this location for 15 years, providing strong platforms with regards to voter protection, police accountability, and in some areas reform, prisoners' rights and prison reform, bridging the digital divide in Black and Brown communities through our NAN Tech Academy, health and disability protections, employment rights, housing support, and so much more. It's imperative that we were able to remain in this location and to continue to be a pillar for this community. COVID-19, we are still in the midst of a pandemic. We saw this community go through so much. In any case where we would normally be receiving, say, 200 calls a day, we were receiving 500 calls a day, plus 150 to 200 people stopping by our offices, looking for resources, looking for answers with regards to housing, employment, food. Our headquarters actually became a food bank of sorts. While so many other locations had to close, we were able to feed over 600,000 meals from this location alone, with 1.6 million meals being distributed across the country. And so that's just a bird's eye view into the work that we've been able to do the past several years. And certainly we look forward to remaining as tenants in this area and certainly continuing the work within the Harlem community at large. And looking forward to the community benefiting from the project here, getting access to education, job resources, housing opportunities, and looking forward to opportunities for contractors, Black and Brown contractors, to be a part of the project as well with the construction developments. And so we thank you so much for your time and look forward to hearing from more of you who are in the community. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We'll now go to our next speaker, Folivi Dosa. We'll give them a moment to set up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Felivi. I'm a freshman at Morehouse and leading youth rep for the NAN Youth Huddle. And I also live only 5 blocks away from National Action Network. And just the amount of resources and help I've been able to receive from NAN has been extraordinary. The reason why I'm even able to go to Morehouse is because of NAN. They have helped me get as much scholarships to the point that I have not paid a cent for my freshman year at Morehouse. And I'm just so grateful and so honored that they were able to help me with that, just being able to get me in contact with people of getting scholarships and stuff like that. Also, while I was here, I was joining the Youth Huddle and I'm now leading it. And I've been able to bring many youth from my community to come into the House of Justice, away from the streets, away from doing whatever they thought they usually do, and able to come in and are able to speak and talk about issues that happen in their community, talk about, policies, talk about civil engagement, stuff like that that we don't usually hear about in school. So NAN has really became a home for me and for many of the youth in my community. So the idea of having a museum will just amplify that and now even give youth more of aspirations and just ideas and just to be proud of being in Harlem and know that there's National Action Network Museum in my community. I'm thinking about all the public high schools, the many that I've went to, from Thurgood Marshall Academy to Arthur Tappan and Polo Grounds, and how now when we're in history class, we can also say, hey, why don't we take a trip to the House of Justice where the museum is? Instead, we usually will say, oh, well, maybe we'll try to go to DC for that museum. But now that the museum right in our community, many of the youth will be very excited to know that we could just go there and stop by real quick. So it just really amplifies and can help the youth in my community of what they can do, what they can see in their future. I'm just very excited of the idea, very honored that I can even come here and speak and be a voice for the youth. I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your testimony and for taking time out of your day today. Our next speaker is Christina Dudley. Christina Dudley, we are ready for your testimony.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
All right. So good afternoon. My name is Christine Dudley, and I moved into this district in 1964. And I have been an advocate and a volunteer within this community for years. I'm also a life member of National Action Network, and I've served in this chapter for 22 years. And I and I've served here for 22 years as the sign language interpreter to NAN's 48-member deaf and hard of hearing component. So I really believe that this project not only beautifies and strengthens this community and its area, but I believe the compatibility of a civil rights organization with enhanced training and cultural space and a civil rights museum will not only be an incentive for people to visit the area and NAN, but it's an incentive to expand and elevate the services here at NAN, which will greatly increase liberation and success for those who utilize these services. For years, my deaf members have complained about wanting to go and visit the museums because they missed out on learning about the civil rights movement and their African history, because it's not taught in the deaf schools. So how many hearing children in this community face the same barriers, missing out on knowing their true history? To have a civil rights museum in their backyard with accessibility is more than a benefit. It is an absolute necessity. A museum sharing past history and a civil rights organization that is building and educating on current history, where space is used to educate and train youth and others about political awareness and about activism, about respecting their community and the people who live in that community, where people are trained and encouraged to take control of their own lives and their own abilities. There's no ifs or buts about the fact that bringing this project to this community in this area will ensure that the National Action Network will improve and expand and continue to help those in this community to go ahead with their lives. So for many in this area, National Action Network was a long-awaited opportunity for equal access. This is the place where they come as a refuge for many. It is their refuge site. There are no second thoughts and no reservations, only knowing that help, hope, solace, and education is awaiting them here in this place. So we see this development project as a project of hope and expectations for our Harlem community. New residents coming into the community, new ideas, new volunteers, new jobs, all a recipe for success at every level. And I thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony.
Hey, Miss Dudley, Miss Dudley.
Our next speaker is Sean Hill. Sean Hill. Sean Hill, coming from the National Action Network, we're ready for your testimony.
Okay. Sean Hill, by the way.
Great, whenever you're ready, please begin.
So I will begin. My name is Sean Hill, and I am the Vice President of the Harlem Neighborhood Block Association. We are centered roughly at the intersection of 126th Street and Madison Avenue in East Harlem. And we are very excited about this new proposed project, both the affordable housing component of it, as well as the retail, and especially the museum potential and office space and event space for the National Action Network, as well as other community groups. Over this past year, our Block Association has discussed numerous times about the struggle of local families to get affordable housing in this community. What we're very excited about is that the proposal, if accepted and the zoning amended, would lead to approximately 250 affordable units for people earning $80,000 or less, anywhere up to $80,000, and could qualify. And that is just super exciting for a community that struggles in this way. We're also very excited about a development like this being constructed at a transportation node. Both the subway, the bus, easy access to the Bronx, even going up to the George Washington Bridge, are all centrally and easily accessible from this location. This is precisely the kind of development New York should be building in this kind of location. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we're very excited about this because of the museum. When our Block Association has talked about post-pandemic Harlem and what we need to bounce back, we've referred time and time again to the importance of bringing tourism back to Harlem. We need to bring local tourists to this neighborhood. We need to bring regional tourists, national, and of course, international tourists as well. Those tourists that come and want to visit the museum that is being proposed, hopefully will sleep here, will eat here, will shop here, and will enrich this community with their presence and learn about our neighborhood and everything from Sugar Hill to the Harlem Hellfighters to the Dorrance Brooks Historic District to Strivers Row, all in this general neighborhood. We look forward to bringing tourism back. Our community desperately needs this, and this will be an important node to augment things like the institutions like the Schomburg, the Apollo, Sylvia's, and the Studio Museum, and bring people uptown once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I will now call our next two speakers, Melba Wilson, to be followed by Moira Davis. Melba Wilson.
Hi.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Melba Wilson. I'm the proud owner of Melba's Restaurant, Melba's Catering, and soon to open Melba's Mussels, all here in Harlem. I was born, bred, and buttered here in the village of Harlem. And actually, I lived right on 144th Street between Lenox and 7th as a little girl. So right around the corner from Nan and the proposed Civil Rights Museum. You know, when you think about Harlem, you think about legacy, you think about culture. Harlem is the Mecca for Black culture. So when I heard about the proposed Museum of Civil Rights, you know, my heart lit up. As a small business owner, it's so important to have things like the Civil Rights Museum, like the Schomburg, the Apollo, et cetera. And I think what it does is it creates economic value. The fact that other businesses in the neighborhood will benefit from people coming up to visit the Museum of Civil Rights is extremely important. It's important to our success. It will allow us to employ people from our communities, which is the reason I opened up Melba's 18 years ago. It's going to create, I think the gentleman was saying, over 1,000 construction jobs and over, I think he said, I wrote it down, I think he said over 567 permanent jobs. These are so important when you live in communities like ours. I'm also excited about the training our youngsters in technology. We all know that technology is the future. And I'm telling you, during this pandemic, I so learned how to work the Zoom thing. So we all know how important technology is. And as one of my restaurant family members said, Melba, it's not going anywhere. And if I didn't believe them before, I definitely believe them now. Revitalizing the area is so paramount to the success of Harlem and our people. So this is something that I'm totally excited about and that I'm so behind because, again, at the end of the day, it's about giving Harlem the pride that it so rightfully deserves. And we're nothing if we don't have economic value. And I truly believe that the Museum of Civil Rights will add much needed economic value and training and jobs to this Harlem community, which we all so love. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We will now go to our next speaker, Moira Davis. Moira Davis will be promoting you to a panelist in just a moment. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Moira Davis. I am the board president of Esplanade Gardens, the buildings that are to your left of where this new structure is supposed to be erected. One of our concerns at Esplanade Gardens, and I think Ms. Dana White mentioned, is the transparency and a lack of notification and involvement or in being informed about what will soon possibly become our neighbor. I also think that the museum and those plans are helpful to a community. However, I believe that Esplanade, this particular area, is already high traffic because we have Yankees tourists are coming in and out of here, or New Yorkers pretty much for games and things of that nature. So 145th Street is extremely congested during normal circumstances. Personally, I share some of the concerns that were mentioned about transportation, routing, the area becoming extremely overpopulated. Another concern is the height of the building. It's at the very corner of 145th Street, and it will definitely block a lot. But once again, it will really make the area extremely condensed and uncomfortable. Is there a way that the building could be less, a little fewer stories? And also this museum, you guys don't think it would be more appropriate to have something like this in a more tourist designated spot like 125th Street? There is a considerable amount of vacancies over there. And 145th Street, this area is more so residential than commercial. So I think that's part of our concern, as well as the lack of communication on the developer's part. I've reached out to NAN repeatedly, and it seemed as if they had no information or idea about what was going on, only to find out today that they're really a big part of it. So I think that's a problem for the community. And thank you for letting me express that.
Thank you very much for joining today and for providing this feedback.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Maurice Burt. The House of Justice location should be able to unmute and provide testimony.
Yes, hello?
Yes, hello, we can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Alexander. I work with the National Action Network. I am also a chief columnist at the Harlem newspaper. And I'm a native of Harlem, born and raised in the Delano Village complex, which is now known as Savoy Park, which was also Savoy Ballroom, a dance place back, before my time. I basically just wanted to say that I'm not just a native of Harlem, I'm also somewhat of a millennial historian. I connect my age bracket with the National Action Network and what this civil rights organization is about and what's currently happening. And I am all for change, the community, as so long as the benefits can be privy to the natives of this community. I believe the Civil Rights Museum is an amazing idea to be placed here on 145th. Harlem is different from any place in the world, so it being right on 145th, I think is great. I think the housing complex that's being built is great, just so long as the people of this community, of Lenox Ave, of 7th Ave, of 8th Ave, Edgecombe, Bradhurst, Amsterdam, long as they are able to have a respectful opportunity to apply for the apartments and gain the jobs and just be a part of this movement as a whole. Respect to anybody that has moved to Harlem from another borough, another city, state, country. I think it would be great for them to also come to the Civil Rights Museum to learn the history, but more importantly for my people of this community to learn the history and learn what's going on. And, I'm all about change as long as it benefits the people in the community. So as far as being a Harlemite and being born and raised here and being for the people and about Harlem, I just greatly would appreciate if the developers and everybody involved that are the decision makers can make sure that my people from the area, Lenox Ave, and all around can have a opportunity to just get involved and be a part of this. Because if they're not a part of it, then they're going to be against it. And if they're against it, it's going to be a bad, climate. So thank you for letting me share my time and voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day and for your testimony today. Okay, now we'll move on to speakers of the public who have dialed in via phone who may not have registered. If you did not register, but you would wish to speak, we'll ask you to please dial *9 on your telephone now to indicate that you do wish to provide testimony at this meeting. All right, it does not appear that any of our dial-in participants are wishing to provide testimony at this time. I'm checking with my colleagues to see if we have any other registrants at this time. Okay, what we're going to do now is take a brief 5-minute break to allow anyone who may not have already registered to indicate their wish to testify by registering through Zoom on the NYC Engage page. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can, of course, visit the instructions on NYC Engage or by dialing for assistance to our call-in hotline at 877-853-5247 with the meeting ID 952-5914-5598. All right, so we will now take approximately 5-minute break and return at 3:19 to follow up with any speakers. Thank you. Speak with you soon. Good afternoon and welcome back. You are tuning in to the remote public scoping meeting for the 145 Museum of Civil Rights project. Again, for the record, the project's seeker number is 21DCP167M. Again, my name is Stephanie Shalou, and I'm the Deputy Director of the New York City Department of City Planning's Environmental Assessment and Review Division. We're currently on part 3 of the public scoping meeting, where members of the public are sharing their testimony for up to 3 minutes. Our 3-minute time tracker is shown on the screen for those of you joining us via Zoom. We will move on to our speakers registered during our 5-minute break. We did have one additional speaker that has signed up, so we will now invite Karen Horry to provide their testimony. You'll be promoted to panelist, and you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera if you wish to provide your testimony.
Yes, hello.
Hello.
Hi. I'm a resident of the area and a native of Harlem. I'm also a member of the community board. And I'm wondering why there has been no outreach to the community board, and there have been seem to have been several meetings on this topic. So I'd like to recommend that this be brought to the community board so that there is more transparency and more opportunity for the community to have to get information about what's going on, or to even have input into the process. And that's my comment and question.
Okay, thank you very much for taking your time and providing a testimony. I will leave it to the applicant to decide what outreach and follow-up they'll be doing with the community board. But as I mentioned earlier, comments received today via the meeting and also in writing through the comment period will be summarized and responded to in a final scope of work that will be issued on the Department of City Planning's website.
Thank you.
Okay, I will now turn again to anyone who has dialed into the meeting who did not register via our hotline. If you do wish to speak and you have not registered and you're joining us, we'll now allow you to dial *9 to indicate that you wish to speak and provide testimony during this meeting. We'll give folks a second to do that. Okay, I'm seeing one speaker, so we'll go to the dial-in participant with the phone number ending in 363. You should be able to dial *6 now to unmute yourself, and we'll receive your testimony now.
Hello, I have just a follow-up question to my earlier. It's really a follow-up statement. I have just some concerns around the amount of advocacy around NAN. This commentary is not about NAN. We understand that they have their situation and whatever the proposal is for their project. We understand that that's already cemented as part of this project. So our community, especially the community of Esplanade Gardens, we appreciate NAN. We appreciate all of their partnerships with our community. So this is not about NAN and shooting it down as it pertains to NAN. So it is a little off-putting that so many folks that represent NAN are advocating around NAN as though this is a NAN issue. This is not a NAN issue for the community and what we are speaking about. Those of us who have concerns about the height of the structure, that is of utmost concern for us. The height is over 25 stories. So we would like more advocacy in terms of just NAN being such a huge partner with Esplanade Gardens, that they would have come to us to say, hey, this is what's happening. This is what has been proposed. This is how we're benefiting, but we also want to make sure that the community at large is pleased with the process and that it's just not NAN. So we really didn't need to hear all of the advocates for NAN, because it is bigger than NAN for us. So I really feel a little bit sideswiped by, 5, 6 people speaking on behalf of NAN, because we understand that NAN is a huge benefactor of this project. Unlike any of the other residents that are occupying commercial space, I don't see any of them on the call because perhaps they don't want to be displaced. Perhaps they want to still have a part of a commercial space in the building. So I'm really shocked and saddened to see that the pizzeria that has been a staple in our community is not on this call. Whether they've been bought out of their leases or not, they should have had a voice in terms of how they wanted to even remain in our community. So our concern is more about the height of the structure, how that affects us, how does it affect the transportation and the overcrowding of the platform, the overcrowding of the immediate block. Those are all of our concerns, and not so much NAN and the benefit of having the educational piece to this project. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you wouldn't mind stating your name for the record.
My name is Dana White.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, apologies. That was my mistake there. Each speaker is permitted to provide testimony just once during our public scoping meetings. If you do have follow-up comments, we encourage you to email or mail us further testimony. All right. Are there anyone else who wishes to provide testimony at this time? Checking with my colleagues. Okay. Seeing none, we will move ahead to close the public scoping meeting today. If I can ask our production team to display the written comment instructions. Perfect, thank you. So for anyone who had difficulty providing testimony, or if you wish to follow up with further comments, please recall that you can submit comments online by selecting the hearing on the upcoming meetings page of NYC Engage portal, which again is www.nyc.gov/NYC-engage, or through DCP's webpage on our Scoping This Meetings page, or by emailing or mailing your comments to the Department of City Planning at the email address and mailing address shown here. So plenty of ways to continue to follow up with your testimony. And as a reminder, the deadline to submit written comments is Thursday, May 20th, 2021. As a reminder, all comments heard today and those we receive in writing will be summarized and responded to in our final scope of work, which again guides the preparation of the draft environmental impact statement. Thank you all for joining us today. The time is approximately 3:30 p.m. and this public scoping meeting is now closed. Thank you all.